Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We are back, my friends. So right now we're actually going to be talking about the other chapter, which is basically at-tayammum. You could say in English they translated it as dry ablution, which I would say probably a rather, I guess they tried their best. Okay, so what is it tayammum and why are we even covering it? So tayammum is basically when a person is supposed to be removing a major or a minor impurity, but then if they didn't have water, whether they could not use the water because of, let's say, probably maybe harmful effect of water on their skin, or whether we're speaking about not having enough water resource, okay? Or probably having some water resource, but not enough for survival and wudu. So that would basically mean that we would have an alternative to using water, which basically is considered as using the earth. So whether we're speaking about using earth, we're speaking about using things, what things like sand, are rocks also allowed? And we'll go in details in just a bit. Okay, so when do we do tayammum? So generally speaking, we would do tayammum whenever, one, we needed to remove the impurity, whether major impurity or whether minor impurity. We talked about both earlier. And we either did not have enough water or we had some water, okay, but that wasn't enough for survival and doing wudu, or we had, let's say, an abundant amount of water, but we are not allowed to use water, perhaps maybe because of illness. Okay, then in that situation, we would basically use tayammum as the alternative. So I'm first going to give instead of giving the summary at the end, I'm going to give the summary in the beginning and then go in details. Okay, so if one wanted to use tayammum and do tayammum for one of the four reasons that basically would allow them to do tayammum instead of an actual showering or an actual wudu or removing the minor impurity, then they can use anything that is considered as organically earth. Okay, explain that. So organically earth would be rocks, sand, or soil. That's organically earth. And where did you get that from? So the ayah said, صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا, which basically means organically earth. Okay, so we could use these. And how are we going to use those? What are we going to do? Like jump in it for wudu or for showering and what? And start, I guess, using it and dumping our faces with soil? The answer is no. It's a simple one. If let's say you had a tablespoonful, okay, of, let's say, soil, you put it on, I guess, your tray, and you basically first you would hit against with your palms open. So you're just doing it with your palms, okay, and you're basically stamping against that soil that you basically had on that tray, and then you're wiping your hands, your palms with it, front and back, and then you're wiping your face with it, and that's basically it. So you're wiping your face and you're wiping your palms with it, and that's not with the actual thing, but you're hitting against the soil, and then you're releasing the dust, or basically the big things, let's say it that way, and you're basically just getting a small amount of dust really from it, and that's what you're wiping your face with, and then you're wiping your palms with. Should you strike one for your face against the soil and then getting the big pieces out, the big pebbles out and whatever, and then should you do one strike against those pebbles or those pieces of soil, one for your hands and one for your face, or one for your face and one for your hands. Differences of opinions between scholars. Okay, so that's tayammum in short and in brief. Okay, now to go in detail. So to go in detail, of course, we know, so this ayah basically summarizes when we would use tayammum as the alternative. The ayah says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين وإن كنتم جنبا فاطهروا وإن كنتم مرضى أو على سفر أو جاء أحد منكم من الغائط أو لامستم النساء فلم تجدوا ماء فتيمموا صعيدا طيبا فامسحوا بوجوهكم وأيديكم منه ما يريد الله ليجعل عليكم من حرج ولكن يريد ليطهركم وليتم نعمته عليكم لعلكم تشكرون. Let's see in English. O you who have believed, when you rise to perform prayer, wash your faces and your forearms to the elbow and wipe over your heads and wash your feet to the ankles. And if you're in a state of janaba, we talked about that before, then purify yourselves. But if you are ill or on a journey, or one of you comes from the place of relieving himself, or you have contacted women, that is sexual relations, and do not find water, then seek a clean earth and wipe over your face, hands with it. Allah does not intend to make it difficult for you, but He intends to purify you and complete His favor upon you, that you may be grateful. Okay, so this is the ayah that basically marks as the main evidence that if a person, whether in a state of a major impurity slash, of course, we're speaking about sexual, or maybe period, or maybe postnatal, then in that situation, fattaharu would basically be the alternative. Well, they have to get into that tahara anyways. But if they are not capable of finding water, then fatayammamu. So if a person is in a state of janaba, they have to do tahara. There's no doubt. But if they were ill or on a journey, or probably coming back to that gha'at after relieving themselves, or even touching women. Scholars have differences of opinions on what marks touching women. Okay, فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً, and you did not find water, then you're going to be using تَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. Then you're going to be using basically the organically earth, basically, and you're going to wipe your faces, your arms with it, for the Lord Almighty does not want to make it difficult. In other words, you still have to perform the prayer, even if you didn't have enough water or you weren't allowed to use water. Okay, so what does the word tayammum? So the chapter is called tayammum. And what does the word tayammum even mean? Okay, so the word itself actually means to have an intention. Okay, here we go right there. To me, it means to have an intention, and basically, according to certain Islamic rulings, of course, it means to wipe over the face, the hands, and basically with a clean earth. And here's that piece of earth, whether you're using soil, sand, or probably rocks as well. Now, we know that tayammum was actually something that the Prophet ﷺ himself had done. And the question is, do I have to be away from the city, for example, or do I have to be in this dire situation? The answer is no. It's not related to a dire situation. It's related to, can you use water? Yes or no? Two, are you allowed to use water, basically? And two, do you have water? Is water available? That's basically what it means. Okay. So we could see that tayammum was mentioned in the Quran, as we had seen just now.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry here. I have a
Go ahead.
question there. Yeah.
Sure.
So, okay, when you said it doesn't have to be dire, so for example, when I had my child last year, so I was in bed because I was about to go in labor, but I wasn't bleeding yet, and I wanted to pray. So I had to have my husband carry me to the washroom to perform wudu. So, say if my husband weren't around, would it have sufficed to use tayammum at that point since I'm
Fair
literally
enough.
not
So
mobile?
if you're fair enough. So if you're not capable of doing wudu, let's say we're going to get to those different reasons, but I'll answer it really quick right now. If you're not capable of doing wudu, let's say you didn't have anybody to help you do wudu, all right? Then in that situation, even the water was there, but you didn't have access to it, whether access physically or access to the water in some way. Maybe, hey, the tap won't even open. Okay, then in that situation, you don't have access to water. So if you don't have access to water, then you could do tayammum as an alternative. But wait a minute, how am I going to do tayammum when I didn't expect to be bedridden and I didn't have any soil next to me and I didn't have anything next to me? I didn't know what to do. So just pray as you are in. Even if you couldn't do tayammum because you don't have earth resources, do tayammum, just pray as you are in. Okay. Can I do tayammum on sheet rock? So sheet rock basically contains, yes, definitely contains some cement, contains some earth stuff blended with it, along with other material. So wallahu a'lam, you could use that as well. So basically tap my head against the wall, basically on sheet rock. Well, according to some opinion, some scholars, yes. Can I basically use the dust that's on my blanket? The answer is no. You want to use earth substance. Okay. All right. So the other thing is that we would know that the Prophet ﷺ himself, we saw that it was evident in the Quran and in the Sunnah. So the Prophet ﷺ had also specified, we've got a hadith, and here are two hadith that the Prophet ﷺ himself had done tayammum. Let's see that. Number one, the Prophet ﷺ said, أُعْطِيتُ خَمْسًا لَمْ يُعْطَهُنَّ أَحَدٌ قَبْلِي نُصِرْتُ بِالرُّعْبِ مَسِيرَةَ شَهْرٍ وَجُعِلَتْ لِيَ الْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وطهورا فأيما رجل من أمتي أدركته الصلاة فليصلي. The Prophet ﷺ said, I've been granted 5 things which are not granted to anyone else before me. Number 1, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made me victorious by frightening his enemies. Even, in other words, even if there wasn't even a battle, they would just be afraid by just seeing a Muslim mujahid right there. For a distance, even if it's basically somebody could be just a distance away and they're just afraid. And sometimes I guess they're just afraid of all the stereotypical images of what a Muslim fighter is like, and they would basically drop their weapons even from a distance because they're afraid. Okay, let's see. The earth, that's the second part of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ had said, which is the area of our own, I guess, evidence right there. The earth had been made for me and for my followers a masjid. A masjid meaning that it's basically the place that contains the needed things to purify ourselves, and a mosque or a clean place for prayer and a means of purification. So one of my followers can pray anywhere and whenever the time of prayer is due. Okay, so what does that mean? So that would basically mean tayammum is an alternative to basically substitute for purification when one basically is unable to use it, or basically the person does not have enough water as a resource. Okay, let's see. When can we use that and what does it work for? It works for whether we're speaking about salah, whether we're speaking about tawaf around the Kaaba, going around the Kaaba, or whether we're speaking about maybe reading Quran as well. Anything that requires tahara. anything that requires tahara, tayammum would basically work
Including
as an
janaba as well.
alternative. Say that again, Bilqis.
Including janaba.
Including
Ghusl,
janaba,
ghusl,
certainly.
yeah.
Right. So whether that's a major impurity or whether that's a minor impurity, tayammum would, you know, there is a Sahabi, his name was Ammar ibn Yasir. Okay. Ammar ibn Yasir, he basically wanted to do kind of like a simple analogy. He thought, okay, if wiping on the face and wiping the palms was an alternative and a substitute for wudu, then what's going to be a substitute for a major, a complete shower is basically jumping into the sand. And that's what he did. He literally jumped into the sand, dived into the sand, and started, you know, getting the sand all over his body. So the Prophet ﷺ told him, all you needed to do, it would suffice for you to just wipe your face once and your palms, and that would suffice for a major impurity as well, meaning you didn't really need to dig into the sand. So what if I wanted to? I'm okay with it. No, don't do it, because the Prophet ﷺ had basically prescribed the alternative, in trying to exceed the limit is a form of extremism. I want you to focus on this one. So when we're speaking about a form of extremism, yes, there is. In Islam, the Prophet ﷺ had basically forbid that one would be extreme in their religious practices. So what is the definition of extremism? The definition of extremism is not what is displayed on the media. Definition of extremism is one basically exceeding the limit, meaning going beyond what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had obligated or what Islam had basically recommended, and making, I guess, their own strict rules that is outside of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Prophet ﷺ had basically taught. All right, so when we're speaking about doing that tayammum, number one, which are the cases? Unavailability of water. Okay, so basically one finds no water and they're basically on a home or on a journey, then in that situation, well, the ayah said, فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً, and you did not find water. So in that situation, that would basically act as a reason to basically use tayammum. Number two, availability of water, but it is insufficient. So they basically needed water for survival. That water wasn't enough, probably for their survival, or probably the survival of maybe their cat or their dog, or else they'll die. So at the end, of course, this is enough. So if you only had enough water for yourself and for, let's say, your the animal that's probably is being used as transportation, or probably animal used for survival, or animal used even if it's a pet. And in that situation, you can actually use tayammum as an alternative. Number three, probability of harm. And this one's important. Probability of harm. When you say probability, that doesn't mean that we have to basically have to be certain, okay? When we say probability, that leaves it to you to basically be fair in your judgment. And we're speaking about you don't necessarily have to have a doctor's prescription. It's enough for you to, hey, anecdotally, okay, with your experience, you knew that your eczema would flare when you would use water, and you would like to use tayammum to prevent that flare from basically going back again. So can you use tayammum? The answer is yes. But the doctor didn't prescribe it for you, but you basically had seen that every time you were to do wudu, that the flaring would come back, the cracking would come back, the itching would come back, etc. So in that situation, hey, you know what happens. So if you're afraid that it's going to harm your skin, it's harming you, then in that situation, that would be permissible. What if I was afraid that it might harm my skin because I bought this beautiful lotion from Sephora and it's quite expensive and I didn't want to wash it away because, hey, it's expensive. So in that situation, sorry, dear, but this is not within the area of harm, and this is غير منضبط. Wait a minute, what does that mean? There's harm that is منضبط and there's harm that is غير منضبط. What's the difference? So harm that is منضبط, meaning that we could actually see the harm. Okay, let's say she's got eczema, let's say cracked skin, etc. That's something that we could actually see. She was capable of seeing that. But something that is basically relative, that, well, she's afraid for her skin and she got this really expensive lotion from Sephora and didn't want to basically waste it doing that wudu, then in that situation, that's a relative thing. And that relative thing, it's not based on your personal judgment that, yeah, well, I'd like to have my skin soft and basically maintain all of that. Then in that situation, that's a relative thing. And that's not a dire thing or an urgent thing. Okay. So in that situation, you cannot use tayammum to maintain your Sephora products. Okay. Okay. And let's see. Either, so if the person feared, whether when we're speaking about illness, okay, as mundabat, if we're speaking about an illness, whether we feared the illness to basically go into worse state, so basically regression, or whether we're speaking about getting worse. So we're speaking about one, maybe getting worse, or perhaps not going through the expected process of healing fast enough. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily have to get worse, but even if water slows down the healing process, you could use tayammum as an alternative. Okay, so just keep that one in mind. And that's the same thing if we're talking about, slowing down the healing process. It's not just for tayammum, but that's the same thing when we're speaking about, can I break my fast? You just have the flu. Yeah, but if I were to have the flu, I don't take enough fluids, it's slowing down the healing process if I'm not taking enough fluids. And certainly in that situation, well, you would have the right to determine to break the fast, but you're going to have to do it on another day. In other words, make it up on another day. So you would be the one to, in this situation, determine whether you want to go for the permission / rukhsa, or whether you wanted to go for the azima, which is the honor of getting a higher reward for the struggle that you're enduring. Okay, number 4, if the person basically is incapable of using water due to illness, whether unable to use water due to illness that prevents them from moving to get the water, here's the situation that the sister was talking about, or there's nobody to help them, so they would fear, hey, for example, she was afraid, and even the nurses, they were all on call, so they weren't really there for me to give me wudu or any of that. And that situation, here we go, you could actually use tayammum. And that was okay, number 5, if the person feared if they were to use that water, let's say a person, there was only cold and extremely cold water available, and they didn't have the ability to heat it, or there was not enough time. Okay, so the ayah says, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, and do not kill yourselves. So wait a minute. Do not kill yourselves. Let's say by using that cold water, I know I had a couple times people telling me that if they were especially newlywed, and if they were to do more, and let's say a couple showers a day, that they would get the flu. And this is, especially for the newlywed, and they were to do more than one shower or more than 3 and 4 and 5 showers per day, that they would get the flu. Can they, in that situation, still do what they want to do as newlywed and do tayammum? The answer is yes, they can. Why? Because at the end, tayammum is an alternative for those that are not capable of using water. Okay, so if the person, let's say they took a shower 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and then the 5th time, okay, they were like, okay, if I take another shower, I know for a fact that I've done this before, I've done it a couple times, and I know for a fact that I'm going to get the flu and I'm going to get sick, then in that situation, we'll say, hey, you can use tayammum. Okay, and that's why that ayah, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Of course, in the end, do not kill yourselves and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as you're able to. Okay, so what if they had some water but not enough for their survival, or at least for the rest of all their body? Then فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Hey, you would know the situation that you're in. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as you can, and considering, remember, considering the permission that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you for tayammum, and your survival is also important. So in that situation, you could use that as basically a permission to do tayammum. Let's see another thing. What if a person, we're not necessarily talking about skin issues, but let's say perhaps a person had a severe cut. Okay, well, that's it. That puts it within a skin issue. Let's say a severe cut and the doctor, or burn, and the doctors told them that they cannot use water on that area, okay, until it fully heals, because if water was put in it, then in that situation it would probably get infected, and with the infection, basically, of course, not everybody responds to treatment the same way, so just keeping that one in mind. So in that situation, the person can cover that area and wipe over basically whatever covering that they had on it. So let's say it was a gauze or probably bandage, all of that, slight wiping. But the doctors told me not to even slight water, not even over the bandage, because they didn't want the bandage to basically fall off and all of that. That's all right. All you need to do is just do tayammum. Okay, tayammum on that area, or tayammum in replacement of all the wudu. So differences of opinions between scholars. Is it tayammum only for that area, or tayammum to basically alter as an alternate for the whole wudu? Okay, differences of opinions between scholars. So opinion 1 said you would do wudu for the organs or the extremities that you're capable of washing, and you would do tayammum for that area that you're not capable of washing. That's opinion number 1. Opinion number 2 said, no, it makes no sense. You're just going to do tayammum and you're not going to wash any of the other stuff. Tayammum would basically suffice to do the whole thing. Okay, so those are the 2 opinions. Okay, so how are we going to do tayammum? Basically, you're going to be wiping, or at least using, like we had said earlier, you're going to be wiping basically one strike, the earth, basically the on the earth, whether you're talking about soil, talking about sand, or you're talking about rocks. Can I use trees? That's something from earth. The answer is no. We're talking about an actual earth, and not necessarily a tree, something that the earth generates. We're talking about an actual earth. When you say rocks, like, what do you mean rocks? That's a considerable opinion that Shafi'is had mentioned. So things that are not burnt by fire. And so you're looking at maybe getting a rock okay, a rock, and just wiping, kind of like rubbing it with your palms, and then instead of getting soil. So can I use that? That's a considerable opinion that you can. Okay, so let's say, how do you do tayammum? We just mentioned that one. You're just gonna basically open up your for tayammum. You're basically going to use your palm. Okay, you're open up with your hands. Open up your basically stretching out your fingers and striking your palms over whether it's the soil or the rock itself, or you're probably rubbing the rock against in between your hands, kind of like a soap, and then you're not taking that soil and putting on your face, but no, you're just getting pretty much really tiny pebbles, or let's say really tiny pieces of dust from that. And that's what's really going to remain in your arm, in your hands. Okay, so you're not getting that stuff and rubbing it on your face, but you're just basically getting a bit of that dust to wipe over first your faces, and then are you striking against the same way that we did earlier and wiping it on our hands? Are we including the elbows? Differences of opinions between scholars. Wallahu alam, the preponderant is just doing it with your palms only. So the palm, basically front and back of the palm, and that's basically it. All right, so what nullifies the tayammum? So whether we're speaking about minor impurities, such as basically defecation, urination, wind, passing wind, or sleeping, that would nullify the tayammum, and therefore you would have to redo it again, I guess. The other thing is what requires a major purity, in other words, ghusl. So that would also nullify. So whether we're speaking about janaba, sexual relations, menstruation, or postnatal bleeding, in other words, that nullifies the tayammum, and you would really have to redo it. Okay, when water is found, so if the water is found, then in that situation, you cannot use that. Then scholars had differences of opinions. If water was found and I had already done my salah, and then my friend comes, hey, saves my day, and actually brings a lot of water, do I have to redo the salah that I had just done with tayammum, assuming that there was no water, not until my friend came over? Do I have to redo my salah or not? Differences of opinions between scholars. Okay, but can I, if I had water, okay, and I had already done tayammum and I didn't break my wudu, okay, and the water, my friend comes over, brings me water, and I had already not broken my wudu. So in that situation, if let's say you wanted to pray the following prayer, since water became available, then in that situation, you would have to redo your wudu, and you don't have to wait till you break your wudu from the tayammum. Right now, no. You would have to use the water to do that tahara. Okay, let's see. This is basically it. This is basically it for tayammum. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer it. No questions? Okay. So what we're going to do.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I've got two questions about that, two situations. One where you're on an airplane and you don't have access to water. Do you just, put your hands on the ground and try to get stirrups and dust? And the other one, when you're in a prison teaching and you're stuck in a building and you do not have access to water. I've had both of those situations come up.
So, in terms of prison, you do actually have the availability to use water in, at least if you're teaching there. They would tell you where the bathroom is. So you could do that. But if let's just assume that, hey, it was going to go through more security and going through all of that and making things harder, then in that situation, you can use tayammum because you're afraid going through that security and all of that was going to basically have you miss your salah. There wasn't enough time for it. So certainly you could use, and certainly the walls themselves in prisons, they are definitely really dusty. All right. And, or even the floor itself, you would have basically the cement on the ground, etc. All of that is basically made of earth. So you don't have to, and of course, they're not going to have soil in the prisons everywhere, but you could use that as an alternative. The other, I forgot the other example that you had mentioned.
On the airplane where the water is
On the
bad.
airplane. So on the airplane, well, when you're on an airplane, you can actually avoid, if you don't want water going into your mouth, you can actually use that washing on the airplane, okay? You can use that and avoid putting water in your mouth. Because
Okay.
anyways, washing your mouth is a sunnah and not obligatory, according to many scholars.
Got it.
So, wash the other areas on an airplane, but you could avoid your washing your mouth or even your nostrils. Completely understand.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Any other questions? All right. So inshallah, we will meet, I think, in 2 days again. Noura, am I right? I forgot the timing for this.
I think we were just going to meet for the rest of Ramadan on Fridays.
Oh, on Fridays? Okay.
But then
okay.
we'll go into full fast mode, inshallah. Not fast mode, but we'll go all for it.
All right, inshallah. Yeah, yeah. So we, inshallah, this is just an hour and 40 minutes, was it? So basically, that's the Ramadan schedule. But inshallah, in the real schedule, we'll definitely be taking the big chunks, inshallah. So subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. See you all.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.